Welcome to Reddit Reader. What sounds like science fiction, but actually exists or will exist very soon. Prosthetics that can react and respond to nerve input and muscle movement. I actually just got approved for the budget, using that word extremely loosely, version of this. A prosthetic knee that records how your remaining muscles move, and if you have one, how the other leg moves and copies it. I've got the initial fitting for it coming up this Tuesday, and I'm so excited. You can apparently also program it to do all kinds of weird stuff too, but my prosthesis won't tell me how just yet because I have a history of tinkering with things. I mean, the internet is pretty wild when you think about explaining it to someone from 100 years ago. It's insane. Neural maps of your brain showing trillions of connections between neurons. Sounds lame, but will be huge when we can map all the neurons in someone's brain. This one excites me. Yeah, there are huge implications in medicine, AI, and many more. Scientists were able to make a clone of an animal that went extinct a while ago. It only survived 10 minutes, but still, being able to revive something that went extinct. And that is how Jurassic Park happens, folks. So certain animals that lived in the past could not survive today, as the oxygen content of the air is vastly different. In addition, whenever we clone, we use the existing animal's womb, so it's not exactly an ideal setup. Really what we need is to create an artificial womb, and then cloning is super easy. Facial and voice deepfakes. AI has accelerated the technology to the point that it's getting hard to identify the fakes. There have already been cases where thieves use deep voice fakes to steal money from companies by impersonating an employee after gathering voice clips from public addresses. Propaganda is going to start using this technology more often in the near future. Quantum computers. They already exist and have gotten a lot of funding lately to further develop the technology. Printing new organs instead of needing donors. I'm in evaluation for a heart bilateral lung transplant. I was born with 5 congenital heart defects and 2 congenital lung defects. Had my first of many open heart surgeries when I was about 10 hours old. I also have 1 working lung, COPD, bronchiolitis obliterans, pulmonary hypertension, pulmonary fibrosis, asthma, heart failure, cardiomyopathy. We all knew transplant was coming, but knowing it and being in the midst of it are 2 different things. When it was official I was a transplant patient, I had a few panic attacks. Kept thinking about how I'm connected to a person that I don't know. They have a family, favorite food, someone loves their laugh. They have life experiences they treasure, and once listed, I'm essentially waiting for them to die. It's something I'm learning to cope with. But something I focus on when my mind wanders is that once it happens, I'll finally know what breathing should feel like. I've never known what that feels like since I was born, with a messed pulmonary system and my left lung never worked over 15%. Now, I can barely walk 50 steps without having to stop and rest. No thanks to Medicaid saying I don't qualify for home oxygen or the portable oxygen concentrator from Inogen, even though we have proof my breathing sucks and my oxygen levels drop a good 20 to 30 times an hour. So waiting to be put on the waiting list is already awful. So when or if they can get to a point in printing new organs with, I'm assuming, would be the recipient DNA, antibodies, etc., in hopes for no rejection to happen, the waiting would be much faster. I have a friend who also has congenital heart defects, and she's been on the list for almost 2 years now, and has been living in the hospital for about 8 months and has an LVAD. It's placed in the heart to help it pump. Without it, she'd be dead, and sadly, she's a hard person to match. It's such a complicated process. Printing new organs would help the situation so much. Facial recognition used by the government police forces. Moon bases and space mining. Nanobots, tiny specialized robots that will swim through your body and deliver medicines to the required organ directly. Also, personalized medicine according to your genetic makeup. The concept in the movie Her will without a doubt become very real soon. I have no doubt that dating bots or having a bot friend will become a thing. Maybe even bot therapists when or if the tech becomes developed enough. A licensed therapist bot. Mainstream universal translators. Some already exist for certain languages. It's really just voice to text, a translation to voice. Once it is downsized and built into your AirPods, it's game on. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What was the worst physical pain you have ever experienced? I accidentally hammered my penis one time. I was hammering nails in a weird position, with each leg hanging over one side of the plank. The nail was being hammered about a quarter foot from my crotch. I sneezed mid-swing and the hammer hit hard. It didn't leave any lasting injuries, but it hurt like hell, and preening did too for a week. You took beating your meat to a whole new level. Tooth infection. I pulled some of my hair out. I could see someone killing themselves to end the pain. I was changing the brake pads on my car and the jack collapsed. The entire car crushed my arm and pinned me to the ground. It was in an apartment complex and there were people outside that heard me yelling for help. A guy and an older lady came and tried lifting the car enough for me to pull my crushed arm out. The skin was peeling off as I pulled with all my might. Once I felt some pressure release, and just before my arm was out, the car slipped out of the lady's hands and crushed my hand. At this point, I'm trying to get her to lift for 2 more seconds so I can get my arm out. After what felt like an eternity, I finally got it out. I can't describe what having your arm and hand crushed feels like, but it was the most intense pain I've ever felt. I kept going unconscious because of the pain until they hooked me up in the ambulance. Dude, what was the damage to your arm and hand? My right 2 knuckles are gone, so I don't really have much movement in my pinky at all. My arm has nasty scars, but is back to normal other than that. Knuckles are gone, as in the bone got crushed and the frags had to be removed? The old lady stole his knuckles. She's the one who tripped the jack in the first place. Witches these days, you never see them coming. I have a condition called proctalgia fugax. This is an uncontrollable spasming of the rectum and can last anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour and a half. It always happens in the middle of the night and feels like I've been probed by aliens without lube. They don't know what causes it, but I can go months without an attack, and then 2 or 3 nights in a week. It is brutal. A few years ago, I was going to the dentist often since my teeth were damaged due to teeth grinding. After he fixed like 5 teeth, he's like, "Oh, we missed something here." And he started diving into my tooth without any anesthesia, going, "Shh, it doesn't hurt." It was the last time I went to see him. Kidney stones. I'm pretty susceptible to them as it runs in my family, so I have to drink a lot of water. I've gotten kidney stones 2 or 3 times within my life so far. I don't want any more, so I'm extra cautious. I asked my doctor if it was normal for the pain to be so extreme. He said he'd been told by multiple women that childbirth was preferable to kidney stones. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What's something about you that nobody knows since it never comes up and nobody asks? Once, when I was like 2 or 3, my family and I went shopping at the nearby strip mall. At some point, I lost my parents and sister. I remember crying in front of one of those large stacked displays at TVs, all playing the song and music video to Britney Spears' "Oops, I Did It Again," for a really long time before anyone found me. Now, the weird part. Whenever something bad is about to come up in my dreams, that song starts playing. I can preemptively wake myself up from nightmares because "Oops, I Did It Again" will start playing right on cue, right before anything really awful happens. Sometimes I even see the music video. This wasn't even a super traumatic incident or anything. I guess the fact that I still remember it is a testament to how good of a childhood I had. I'm a twin. Could know someone for years and it never comes up. But when it's finally mentioned, it's so mind-blowing to them that I have a twin because they've known me for so long and didn't know. It doesn't come up because people don't often ask other people, "So are you a twin?" without any reason to ask. I found out my friend was a twin when I was 28. I'd known him since I was 15, but he only ever mentioned his brothers and not his twin. I finally worked out why he was occasionally an asshole and ignored me in public. It wasn't him, but his twin brother never bothered to correct me. Turns out his twin is an asshole regardless. That white streak in my hair is not dye, it's natural. Everyone just assumes I dye it and doesn't ask about it. As a kid, I could nibble American cheese into any state shape and most large countries. It was my talent when I was interviewed for commercials once, and it got me on Kids Say the Darndest Things. Edit, I'm adding the story. After we filmed at NBC CBS Studios, my mom and I went to lunch at a nearby restaurant. Jerry Seinfeld was eating, and my mom said she'd give me a box of Tic Tacs if I walked up and said hello to him. I am ambidextrous. I was born a righty, but I had my right arm really badly broken as a kid and took a while to heal, time during which I had to adjust to using my left hand for most of the things. After my right arm finally healed, I still used my left hand for a while because I was so used to it. But once I started reusing my right one, it was still so natural, so I kinda trained my left one to work just as well as the dominant one. Nobody really gives a shit. Although one of my direct reports noticed once that my handwriting is just as calligraphic with my left hand as it is with my right one. Same. Boxer fracture twice on my right hand during college, so I had to write all my notes with my left hand for 2 semesters. I thought my left hand writing looked terrible compared to my right, but most professors said it looked better than most people write with their main hand. It came in handy when playing pool, and I'd play left-handed until serious money came in. Then I'd switch to my right hand and clean them out. I did a ton of drugs as a young adult and committed some felonies, but I never got caught and decided to take a different path when all my friends started getting locked up. Not a snitch, just more careful. Now I work at a prison with people who were convicted of the same types of things that I used to be involved in. Most of them assume I don't even know what marijuana looks like. If anyone knew the truth, it would hurt my credibility. But those experiences are actually what make me good at my job. Any chance you're going to admit to those felonies on Reddit? He smoked 3 marijuanas. Nice try, FBI. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What is your favorite insult of all time? It's amazing how you brighten up a room when you leave. Some people are like clouds. Once they off, it's a beautiful day. I overheard a student at my school addressing the 8th grade twats that would harass anyone. I bet your parents change the subject when people ask about you. I get why people talk about you when you're not around. In the 70s, the Cleveland Browns fans would throw paper airplanes in the stadium. A lawyer who was a season ticket holder sent a letter to the Browns stating that if he or any of his guests were injured, he wouldn't hesitate to sue. It was given to a junior lawyer at the Browns organization. He sent the letter back and wrote, "Attached is a letter that we received on November 19th, 1974. I feel that you should be aware that some asshole is signing your name to stupid letters." One of my all-time favorite burns. You are not the stupidest person in the world, but you better pray they don't die. You're not a mistake. You're a regret. Are you a professional moron or just a gifted amateur? Carl Johnson. I'd love to see things from your perspective, but I'm afraid that I can't shove my head that far up my ass. I'd agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. Expected nothing, still disappointed. When they circumcised the right honorable gentleman, they threw away the wrong bit. Said in a British parliament, I believe. Bob Ross would call you a mistake. Isn't it rather dangerous to use your entire vocabulary in a single sentence? You are proof of anal conception. I would challenge you to a battle of wits, but I see you are unarmed. By Shakespeare. You're about as useful as a paper condom, and you're worth even less. I hope your day is as pleasant as you are. I am jealous of people who have not met you. You're about as useful as Anne Frank's drum kit. There are approximately 1,010,300 words in the English language, but I could never string enough words together to properly express how much I want to hit you with a chair. Alexander Hamilton. I hear that bit almost made it into the Constitution. You couldn't pour piss out of a boot if the instructions were on the heel. Your ass must be jealous of all the shit that comes out of your mouth. You look like a before picture. pretty much anything attributed to Winston Churchill. Paraphrased, "Sir, if I were your wife, I would poison your drink. Madam, if I were your husband, I'd drink it. Mr. Churchill, you are drunk. Yes, and you're ugly, but tomorrow I'll be sober." Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so that way you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What was the biggest misconception that you had as a child? Underneath the floor of a building was just an endless void. I thought people who replace floors were incredibly brave, so I always told my parents I wanted to replace floors. For a year or so, I wanted to be a tax collector. I saw one in a Pink Panther cartoon and thought they were just people who knocked on your door and kept all the money you paid them. That people of other races just had different levels of being tanned. Found out in the mall that I was wrong. I lived in such a white area that I thought my mom, who is totally white British ethnically, but has much darker features than my other mega pale family, was black. Similar thing. My dad's always been tanner, especially since he works in the sun every day, but he's white. Well, until I was 6, I thought he was black. I thought having a job was just you picking a company you like, waltz in, find an empty spot, and start doing something. I had no concept of interviews, tests, and all the paperwork involved. To be fair, some of the older generation act like that's the way it is when giving advice. My grandfather told us stories that it used to be like that. There was a severe labor shortage, so you'd walk into the factory in the morning and get hired on the spot. If you didn't like the work, you'd quit after a short period and just go to the factory next door and repeat. He said he had about 16 jobs in 1 week at one time. My mom always told me that if I got lost or separated from her while out in public and couldn't find a police officer, I should seek out the nearest woman with children. Her reasoning was obviously that another mother would be a good kind of stranger to talk to, much more likely to help and less likely to harm a lost child. My reasoning, however, was that if I somehow never found my own mom again, I could and would just go home with the woman and have new siblings to play with so I wouldn't get lonely. All that you needed to do to get pregnant was get married. I thought a potluck was where everyone brought food to a party and put it all in one giant pot. Then you would scoop out a plateful and whatever you got was your luck. I thought being fired from work meant that the fired person gets killed. Every time my mom would tell me my sisters not to bother her, she could get fired from work. She partially worked from home. I assumed that her boss would come into her office and literally shoot her. I was so terrified that my mom would get in any trouble at work. If you missed an exit on the highway, you would basically end up in a different state. Judging by the way people cut across 4 lanes of traffic, rather than spend a few extra minutes turning around at the next exit, I feel like there are some adults that still think this is true. I would bury coins in my backyard so I could dig them up next year and be rich, because buried treasure. I thought you could actually grow a rainbow if you planted Skittles because I saw it in this commercial. I would water the little area where I planted it every day for like a month before my parents finally told me the truth. For whatever reason, I always thought limes were just unripe lemons. When I was in my early 20s, I went to buy a lemon tree and was so confused to see that they had lime and lemon trees. I feel like an idiot every time I think of it. My parents weren't raised in the US, but they tried to make sure my siblings and I got the whole American experience. So they tried introducing us to Christmas and even sent us to Christian summer camps. For some reason, this caused a sort of confusion in my mind, and I thought Santa was God, and I was never corrected because my parents didn't understand Christianity or Christmas. Down syndrome was when you were really sad. I thought you could say something like, "Looks like you got a case of Down syndrome," to your crying friend. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What sucks about being your age? Being retired. The 2 things that really suck are watching good friends pass away yearly, having to push through the aches and pains of old age to do the things you enjoy. But I realize that I'm luckier than many of my friends who have had hip, knee, or shoulder replacements or open heart surgery. But your second point is important to keep your mobility. My grandparents basically hung it up at 70 and sat on the porch all day every day, and started really slowing down in their 80s to the point that they both needed a cane and then a walker. My grandma is still alive at 93, but lives in assisted living and sometimes struggles even with a walker. My dad just turned 70 this year, but still plays tennis 2 to 3 times a week and bocce ball twice a week, and still takes on most of the housework. When he retired at 58, he stopped moving and got bad arthritis and back pain, and had to be told at physical therapy that he has to keep moving or it'll just get worse. Mid to late 20s, feeling like I'm way behind from where I should be by now. That never goes away. Best case scenario is you become at peace with where you are in life, and between the happy moments you still fleetingly think about what could have been. No one is completely satisfied. I thought 50 was awesome. I finally had enough perspective to realize that I'd been shooting myself in the foot all my life. Being sore because I slept wrong. I'm 29. 5 couples from my friend's circle are expecting a child or recently got married. A few others have built a solid foundation in their career and are buying houses. Most of us grew up in apartment buildings, so it feels fancy to own a house at 30 where I'm from. Meanwhile, I'm currently a student and broke. It feels like everyone's so far ahead in life that they'll always be a step further and I'll never catch up. This is why I've largely abandoned social media. Once your friends start getting married and having kids, becomes lonely. Yep, doesn't help when you move 3,000 miles and don't know anyone, especially now since I can't even socialize with new people and I've made very few legitimate friends out here. Making friends as an adult is hard. There's no obligation to spend enough time with other people to become friendly, unless you join a club, which feels lame and weird, but does actually work. Balding, back pain, bad vision. I'm 23. At 73, I am reminded daily by my body that I'm not 25 years old anymore. I'm too old to take up most action sports. The body doesn't bounce back like it used to. That shit's real. And too young to retire and just off all the time. The early 30s is that weird age where you're just old enough to be out of touch with what's cool, but not yet old enough to be fully progressed in your career, to be sitting on enough stacks to not care about that. Getting there at least. I had a coworker say he felt this way about turning 30, but then someone changed his mind by saying that he's old enough to know who he is and what he wants and needs, but still young enough to do things with his life and have fun. I don't know if this helps, I'm only 18, so I wouldn't know. This is exactly how I feel, 31. I felt so lost for the longest time trying to figure out who I was. I put myself through some shit and I have experienced a lot. Now I just do stuff I love doing and I care a lot less about what people think of me. I'm even more active than I was in my 20s. Was playing on 3 different sports teams pre-COVID, and in my 20s I was very lazy and mostly high. I know this is just my experience though, and it can be much different for others. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What is a fact that can possibly save your life? Airplane depressurizes and the mask drop? Put your mask on first, as instructed. At 35,000 feet, you have 30 to 60 seconds of useful consciousness. Make it count. When having a heart attack, you don't swallow aspirin, you chew it. Is this real? Gets to the bloodstream faster through the walls of the mouth. Do not delay getting out of a burning building. The flames are not what will kill you. The smoke will get very thick and toxic very quickly, and you will not be able to see the way to get out. Stay low and go, go, go. The oxygen is down near the floor. And don't think a handkerchief over your face will do shit. A wet towel can help in tandem with staying low. Keep the smoke from burning your lungs. But yeah, it's not like you'll be able to just walk out normally doing that. This obviously won't work all the time, but if someone grabs you by the arm, don't pull away. Twist your arm instead. Your arm goes nearly all directions, but their wrist won't. Probably said already, but bad CPR is better than none, even if you're unskilled. You literally cannot make the person more dead, as being dead is what predicates CPR. If you have a puncture wound to the chest or abdomen, the first thing you should do is place a non-porous, think plastic bag, object over the wound. It will help prevent tension pneumothorax. A tourniquet is quite simple to put on and can save a life if there is no other option. Placed close to the site or near, not on a joint. Never remove a tourniquet once placed, as clots can travel to the brain and lungs. Also, mark the time you put it on. If you're at an accident scene and have no medical training, something you can do is collect information and help calm victims. This is quite helpful as it assists the paramedics with triage and helps potential injured persons' heart rates down. Alternatively, learn how to hold C-spine. If your car ever gets stuck on the train tracks, look for a sign on the crossing arms. This is the Railway 911 and as a number to call to stop traffic, as well as your exact location. If you've been cut deeply, pack gauze into the wound as tightly as possible, then hold pressure. If you are driving in inclement weather, pay attention to truckers. They are often warned ahead of time of wrecks and things due to their radios. Also, never drive in the rain without headlights. Maybe not your life, but someone else's. Most drowning is silent. The victim quite literally cannot speak to call for help as they are too desperately trying to get any air at all. Drowning can look simply like a person bobbing in the water until they no longer come back up. Keep a watch out, especially if it's kids. Soy sauce is deadly if consumed in large quantities at once, so no stupid soy sauce dares or challenges, please. If you ever almost drown to the point of throwing up water or passing out, even if you feel 100% fine, get to a hospital. Your lungs can unwittingly self-fill up with fluid over the next few hours. This is a New Zealand specific one, but all emergency numbers work here. The official number is 111, but 999, 000, 911, etc. will all work. This is so that tourists can still reach emergency services easily. If you're being tied up, puff yourself out as much as possible so it'll be easier to wiggle out of. Tense muscles, inhale deep, and stretch out your arms and legs to make more space. Me and my classmates used to have competitions where we tie each other up with a rope. It started out with hands, but it went to full body, and we'd time ourselves on how fast we could get out. It was also good practice for tying someone up since we got to see which methods work best. I used to pull this trick all the time and get the fastest time. My hands would be really red and there would be lots of marks, but it was worth it. And that, kids, is how I found my fetish. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What was your biggest no going back now moment? This one is quite literally a not going back moment. As a Boy Scout at summer camp, we would always take large group hikes on the last day of camp. This particular camp in West Texas was located in the middle of a deep canyon and cut through with a small stream. The day before our hike day, it rained a bit, but not too much to make us worry. It was drizzling in the morning when we got up, but we were Boy Scouts, so that obviously didn't stop us. So our long hike had us cross the small stream, up the canyon maybe 10 to 15 times, no problem, and everything went great. After a while, we get to a medium-sized pond that we all decided to go swimming in. That was fun, and we all had a blast. We get out and dressed, and we keep going farther up a hill to continue our hike. We get to the top, and we hear this wonderfully ominous rushing noise. We look over a ledge and see that the water in the stream was moving a bit faster than we remembered. A friend and I volunteer to go back and see what's happened. A flash flood had ripped through the area we had just left moments before. The water in the pond was at least 7 feet higher than it was 5 minutes before, and it was covered in foam and rapidly overflowing. We decided as a group to test our luck and go back to see if we could get out, but the last stream crossing had turned into a very fast-moving river crossing. Needless to say, we were We literally couldn't go back, and we had to wait a long time to get help, and now get to the almost flooded camp. Happened to a friend of mine in Philmont. He went to the bathroom and had to cross a small stream to get there. The sky opened up for a few minutes, and he still hadn't come back. We heard yelling a little later, and he was stuck because that small stream had quadrupled in size and was now a raging river. Stepping off that sandbar, I could barely reach to swim out to the girl caught in a riptide, and not knowing how a riptide worked. It took what felt like hours, but spoiler alert, we made it. Too early in the season for lifeguards. I remember calling out to people walking their dogs on the beach, but we were so far out they didn't even look towards us. I'm sure she is eternally grateful that you took that step. Don't know. She was a friend of a friend and I barely knew her. I was trapped in a riptide as a young child. A stranger pulled me out and almost 30 years later, I still remember his face and how emotional it was. Trust me, she remembers you. When I was a kid, maybe like 7 or 8, I got pulled out by a riptide. None of my family saw it happen until I was way out there. Some random teenager swam out to haul me back. Never got her name, but I'll gratefully remember her face forever. I'd bet the girl you hauled in feels the same sort of gratitude. I hopped a freight train once, and the moment it hits 15 to 20 miles per hour, you're just along for the ride. But the real no going back moment came when the train stopped on a siding outside Winnemucca. After waiting there for like 5 hours, I decided to walk into town and get some ice cream sandwiches. As soon as I got 50 yards from the train, I realized if it starts rolling now, I'll be too far away to chase it down. I'll just be stuck in this town for a while. Edit. For you kids out there, riding freight trains is dangerous and illegal and dirty and loud and unreliable. Don't do it. Also, I should point out that Winnemucca is home to some of America's best Basque restaurants, fantastic cowboy heritage sites, and it's the gateway to the Black Rock Desert. It's got something for everyone, not just stranded hobos. TBF, this is how 90% of Winnemucans ended up there. When I was about to get on the plane to my first semester of med school, my dad, never one for sentiment, said, "Well, you're now actually worth more dead than alive. Don't screw this up." Why were you worth more dead? Insurance? I am done with school and worth approximately negative $460,000. If I die, my value goes up to zero, which is a clutch business move. LOL. While motorcycling through Vietnam, it was getting late and I was running low on fuel. Too low to turn back to the previous town. If that wasn't bad enough, my bike rack broke. Luckily, a kind man and his daughter stopped to help. He knew no English outside of "I can fix," so I followed him. I wore my bags and held the rest in my lap. Entering the town, my jaw dropped. It was complete calamity. The streets were filled with people carrying 2x4s, rocks, and bottles. Literally hundreds of people. It was like a war zone, with people smashing scooters and cars on fire, people yelling and fighting. A few individuals were running for their lives with mobs in tail. I can still vividly see one man's face as he looked over his shoulder in dread. There were too many people to drive through, so I had to slow down to a crawl. All I kept thinking was, please don't notice me, please don't rob me and smash my face in, please know I'm with this kind man and his daughter. The moment lengthened as a few of the town folk started to notice me. I was scared shitless, but produced a warm smile. The smile wasn't returned. The kind man looked back, and those who were taking interest in me noticed. Can't help, but think it helped. We finally breached the throng of people and pulled down an alleyway to his place. I still didn't feel safe, but I needed gas and my rack fixed. I tried to ask the man why all these people were fighting one another. He just smiled and made the drink gesture. It was during Tet, or the Vietnamese New Year. He fixed my rack, gave me some gas, and wouldn't take any money as payment. However, like Christmas, the kids received money, so I gave his daughter a fat wad of cash with his blessing. About 45 minutes later, I arrived safely at my hostel in Nirvana. Parachute jump. My life is now no longer in my hands. Oh well. Geronimo. First time I went skydiving was a tandem jump, and the guy told me on the ground, once we get in the door, we'll rock back and forth 3 times. On the 3rd time forward, just roll out the door. So me, being the trusting sort, thought that was a solid plan. We get up to altitude, open the door. I put my feet on the little platform and crossed my arms just like he told me to. The rocked back once and pushed us out the door immediately. My only thought was, that wasn't 3. Oh, we're falling. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What's something you're glad your friend introduced you to? Rock climbing. It's become my favorite form of exercise, not to mention how fun it is. Edit. For everyone asking, a rock climbing gym will have all the resources you need to get started if you don't have any climber friends. He introduced me to his closest friends, all really great people. Now we all have good times together and share so many things of mutual interest. It's really opened up my world in a way I hadn't previously thought possible. That's beautiful. The best gift anyone can get is new friends, or maybe second best. A flamethrower would be pretty hard to beat. New music. It's always hard for me to figure out what I like, and they help give me so much from the experiences I got out of it. I feel like everything I like was introduced. I'm discovering things on my own, but I'll say sushi. This. I was always the guy who gave people the Karen stare because they ate raw food, until one day my friend told me to shut up and just try a piece. Now I'm planning to gorge myself on sushi as soon as the lockdown ends. D&D. I would have never played otherwise, and it's so much fun. Same. For years, my friend from university suggested we play D&D during a weekend. Every time I shot him down, pretending to be an orc or an elf or whatever the wasn't my idea of a good time. Then a couple of years ago, someone I was dating introduced me to it, and it was dope. Kill some goblins, eat some cheese, drink some beers. I'm not sure if it was the fact that I was older or the fact that I'd finally got over myself a little bit, but I got way into it. Like, way into it. Like a file of notes thicker than some novels into it. I finally got a chance to DM for the friend who'd kept pushing it all those years ago. We're at opposite ends of the country now, and it was incredibly fun, even with the 10,000 watt I told you so grin he had the whole time. Minecraft. I was mid-20s and they spent years trying to get me to play, but I thought it was a kid's game. I finally played one day and loved it so much that I'd spent the next 4 years, way more into it than they ever were. There are just so many ways to play. You can treat it like a kid's game. You can play it like a kid. You can be an architect. You can be an engineer. Literally anyone can find something that interests them. Sleep. Seriously, I stayed up all night, had shitty sleep, hygiene, and poor mental health. We lived together for 6 months, and she helped me get on a sleep routine. Changed my life. It's incredible just how much difference a decent sleep schedule can make. I haven't had to use an alarm in years now, and I always wake up at the same time and don't feel like shit. Not to mention just how much more productive during the day you can be. I find most people discover this in their mid-20s. Given what I know of how the human brain works, our neuroplasticity quiets down, and we form our final brain, so to speak, in the mid-20s. It changes a lot of mental incentives for sure. I suspect they're related. On an off note, it interests me to think about how teens, young 20s, talk about being 30 and how their life will be over. But many people are content, barring financial relationship stress, with the new adulting lifestyle when they get there. It's because of this big mid-20s brain switch from my experiences. 16-year-old you would hate being 30, but your 29-year-old self, not so much. Generalizations doesn't fit everyone, of course, but many of us seem to be fitting into this. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What's the worst coworker you've ever worked with? Fast food, third shift. The only other employee stayed in the bathroom doing blow. How the do you afford Coke on a fast food paycheck? My coworker likes to initiate conversations, then does long pauses where you go to say something back, then he cuts you off and keeps talking. He has entire conversations almost entirely by himself. He also likes to make changes to my paperwork before it's turned in. Ends up riddled with spelling mistakes while he tries to make the content look smarter. Fortunately, it's all electronically stamped with who made revisions. My boyfriend does that weird conversation thing. Sometimes I just try to talk over him. Sometimes I leave the room. He still doesn't know what I'm talking about when I bring it up. My current suspicion is he's formulating the next sentence during that pause. Either way, it drives his mom and I insane. I couldn't imagine dating someone where when they talk it drives you insane. Worked with a girl who would sometimes just lay on the floor and play on her phone. She would routinely flip out about something her boyfriend did and just start screaming curse words, sometimes in front of customers. She was eventually fired for smoking weed while on the clock. Every time I think I'm a up, I read stories like this and I feel better about myself instantly. I had a manager once who dumped trash on my desk my third day there. She said it was to remind me that taking out the trash was part of my job description. It wasn't. I was a research assistant at a mortgage firm. Whoa, had the same situation. We had a full maintenance crew, but my department had previously helped with parking lot trash until our hours were cut, which was discussed and mandated from corporate. The top guy for our location came in extra early, picked up the parking lot trash, and dumped it on my desk. Then he berated all of the managers in front of everyone for my department. Just the tip of the iceberg when it came to that asshole, though. Context: I work in a hospital as a nurse's aide, and my department focuses on transporting patients around the facility for tests and room changes. I work night shift, and this person started their shift at 6 a.m. There was this lady I worked with that just had the nastiest attitude. Normally I can get along with most folks, but this person just brought the whole room down with negative vibes. Nothing was ever good, and she always had bad shifts. One thing she did that upset a lot of people was take patients down for x-rays and leave them down there to return to our office. The big thing to remember here is that even the lengthiest x-rays take maybe 10 minutes at the very most, 2 to 5 minutes on average for the scans. Every morning we got x-rays to do, and I had to send her back down to return patients to their rooms after the x-ray technicians called right as she got back to our office. The instances of leaving patients were common, so I informed my boss several times in person and email. Apparently, she had an attitude with every other department we worked with and never informed nurses that we were moving their patients. Big no-no when meds and vital signs need to be done. One day, she abandoned a patient in the ER waiting room when they were waiting for a ride home and told no one, so security had found a patient just sitting alone for 15 to 30 minutes without supervision. It took this and a year of recorded evidence for this person to finally get fired. When that happened, it's like a dark cloud lifted and a lot of people were relieved. Oh, and she tried to get various employees around the facility to sign a form to argue against her case. One person signed. Not necessarily a coworker, but my old supervisor literally told me not to think, even if it's wrong, that I do things her way, and not to ask questions because I should already know what to do. I had just gotten the position. When I was an intern, there was this old shrew who would call people into her office. My cube shared a thin wall, gossip, then call those people in and tell them what was said, etc. She would try to frame people for shit she did wrong. She was so arrogant. And she refused to adapt to workforce modernization. Example, she refused to learn how to hyperlink in emails, documents, etc. A real ray of sunshine she was. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. George Carlin said, "Think of how stupid the average person is, and realize half of them are stupider than that. What real-life example have you seen that validates this view?" Customers arguing that their tattoo is backwards while their artist tries to explain that no, your tattoo is fine, it just looks backwards because that's how mirrors work. I'm a physician, eye doctor specifically. I will tell you that the longer I work, now 15 years, my standard for the average person continues to decline. Case in point, thanks to the awful information filtering out there, I had a patient just last week who read that vitamin D helps you resist a coronavirus infection. Well, he had also read that you can get more vitamin D by getting more sun. So he wanted to collect as much light as possible with his eyes. As a result, he stared at the sun for a solid 60 seconds and burned holes directly into his retinas, permanently reducing his vision with no chance at future improvement. About half the calls I take on a daily basis. People call 911 to ask whether Walmart is open, to report that they didn't get enough mayo on their burger, to complain that cleanup at a fatality wreck is taking too long, all sorts of silly, out-of-touch shit. Granted, there is probably some level of mental illness and or substance abuse present in those calls, but still. I used to work for a chatbot app. Our app would text our users every morning with a greeting in a different language, i.e., hola, bonjour, etc. One day we got blown up by a user saying their account was hacked. She said, "My name is Kim Smith, not Kim Konnichiwa. Someone's hacked my account." When we explain that our service has been clearly saying hello to her in other languages every day, and that konnichiwa is hello in Japanese, and her account was fine, she went on a racist rant and said Disney was behind the destruction of America. Yep. Friend of mine showered in cold water for a year because he never thought of turning the other tap to see what it would do. I have pressed every single button, turned every tap, and flicked every switch in my house at least a million times, including fuses. How people can just stand in a shower and never try anything, especially if they don't have hot water, just blows my mind. At the start of working from home due to COVID, I had a few users submit tickets for connectivity issues. These tickets got through 2 lines of support before landing in my queue. Turns out that the corporate Wi Fi doesn't follow you home and you need home internet in order to connect to the VPN. I recently spent 20 minutes on the phone with a board member trying to diagnose why his camera wasn't working for our online meetings. Funny thing, you have to actually have a camera in order for it to work. My dad is a pesticide investigator for the state and heard this on a complaint. I set out all these bird feeders and bird baths, but not one bird comes to my yard. I bet it is all those pesticides that crop duster is laying down in the field. Local school board member as they were standing in her 5-acre yard with 20 or more cats running around. I used to manage a retail store that sold teen clothing, so as expected, I primarily had teens working for me. One employee came to the back room while I was on break and asked what I was eating. Somehow the topic turned to how I should have bought chicken for lunch because she wanted chicken. I told her I was vegetarian and therefore don't eat meat. She tells me chicken is not meat, it's poultry, and vegetarians can eat poultry. She said at the grocery store, the aisles list meat and poultry separately, so they're obviously different. We argued for a couple of minutes before I finally told her to go back to the sales floor. She didn't last at the job long, but damn, you know the reason you bury a rattlesnake after you kill it is because bees will eat it. Then bees can sting people with rattlesnake venom. Guy I heard constantly trying to pick up women on public transit. That sounds like a sick superpower though. Then a bear eats the honey and it gets snake fangs and stingers on its claws. The circle of life is both gorgeous and terrifying. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. If you've ever asked the universe for some kind of sign and got it clear as day, what was it and how did it go? When my mom died, I was pretty destroyed. We were very close. I was feeling like I couldn't understand how to live in the world without her. One day I was driving home from work depressed as hell, and I started thinking how much I'd love it if I could get a sign from her, surprising myself a bit as I'm not at all religious and am highly skeptical about things like signs from the universe. But I missed her so much that I mentally asked the universe for a sign. She really loved birds, so I thought wouldn't it be cool if it came in the form of a bird, maybe a sparrow or even a pigeon or something. I got home, parked my car, and walked up the path to the cottage I was renting. This was in the city of Berkeley, California. As I was unlocking the front door, off to the side a flash of color caught my eye. I turned to look, and it was a Chinese pheasant. I had no idea what it was. I had to look it up, but if you Google Chinese pheasants, you'll see why I was so blown away. It was brilliantly colored, with gold on its head and back, orange and black bars on its neck, bright red chest, and blue on its wings. The most psychedelic bird I've ever seen. And it was standing on my front porch, a bird native to f***ing China. I had no clue how the hell it could even be there. I thought I had to be dreaming, so I got my neighbor to come see it. We stared at it with our jaws hanging open. Then it sort of squawked and flew away. And it hit me that I had asked my mom, the universe, for a sign, thinking maybe a drab little sparrow or a pigeon, and what I got was a bird that was ridiculously over the top, and it was exactly the kind of joke my mom would have loved. I'm still skeptical and not religious and don't believe in fairies and shit, but that was weird and also great. I was in the depths of despair. I had lost my great job, had to travel 2 hours every day with heavy tools each way to a temporary job I was doing. Sitting on the bus, thinking my world was over, and it all kind of got to me all at once, and I began to tear up. Not wanting to bawl my eyes out in public, I held it in, so I asked for something, anything that could show me that life wasn't worthless. A lady I didn't see must have seen how bad I was, or maybe it was just coincidence. But just after I cried out in my head, I heard the words, "Everything is going to be okay." It saved my life. Edit. I had no idea that this would affect you all so much. Sometimes it might be dark and a small spark starts a fire. Sometimes you're the small spark. Be the change you want to see in the world. Similar story, stuck in a horrific job, eating myself to death at McDonald's. I was having a particularly day, and my boss had screamed at me and the other technicians over something that she, the boss, had up. I must have been looking extra miserable because this little old lady comes in. She notices me sitting at a table alone and smiles. She simply says, "Hey, don't let him win." It cut to my core. How could she know my fight? It's like she saw right through my defenses and nailed my situation. A little while later, she was leaving with her food and she smiled again and said, "Have a nice day." And I smiled back and told her, "Thank you, you too." So that's been my mantra ever since. Don't let him win. It's simple, but it got me out of that situation. I was walking. Would have been a 4-hour drive, and I was walking. I straight up begged for a car to stop and pick me up, and literally seconds later, a woman stopped who was traveling all the way to where I was heading. Same town, 4 hours away. What are those odds? Similar thing happened to me. A guy picked me up when I was hitchhiking and was going to drop me off at the train station so I could catch a coach to my hometown 4 hours away. As we were chatting, we realized we were heading to the same town. He was a delivery driver doing drop-offs along the way. He offered for me to stay with him in the car. I helped him map out his deliveries, and he bought me a pub feed and dropped me off outside my parents' place and came in for a cuppa and met them. I'm not superstitious at all, but my uncle is. When my nan passed, he went to see a fortune teller who told him that any time our family sees white feathers around, that's Nan's way of showing us that she's there. I thought it was a load of bullshit and forgot about it. A few years later, I was at a music festival. Everything was coated in dirt and dust being churned up by thousands of people's feet. Even the air was so thick with dust it was making it hard to see and breathe. I was on the edges of the mosh pit when I started to have my first panic attack. I'd never had one before, didn't know what was happening to me, and I was terrified. I felt like I was being crushed and like I was the only person in the world at the same time. I remember desperately thinking, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be here alone. I crouched down in the middle of the dirty, dusty crown, and when I opened my eyes, there was a single white feather on the ground, right between my feet. It was perfectly white, no dirt, not stepped on or anything, in a mosh pit. I stared at the feather until I could get my breathing under control and get out of there, and I still have that feather. Your nan was moshing with you. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. People who are 40 plus and happy with their life. What is your advice to people in their 20s? Don't fall for the trap that your life needs to be one long narrative that you should be building. Life is best when it's a bunch of happy moments that just happen to be connected. Don't try to make your life into a novel. Make it a book of poems. I hesitate to give advice, being unqualified to do so. Instead, here are some points that may or may not be worthy of consideration. Time is very short, and as you get older, it speeds up more and more. Time is more important than money. In theory, you could end up a billionaire, but nobody is ever a time billionaire. Rich or poor, you're gonna get maybe 100 years at the absolute max, and probably not that much. There will be several versions of you as you walk your path, but one version that kind of colors all the other versions. This version you could call the real you. It pays to spend time figuring out who that real you is. You will have to deal with people, learn how to leave them happy to have been in your presence, and you will not lack for friends and loved ones. Speaking of loved ones, just because someone is a blood relative, it doesn't mean they're worth a shit. If your parent, sibling, or child is a complete asshole unworthy of your attention, don't waste further time on them. Find something you love to do and do that. Do it every day. It doesn't matter if you make money at it or get recognition because of it. Do it like Henry Darger did in his writing and drawing, like Vivian Meyer did her photography. Do good work. It is its own reward. I am a geezer, 64 years old. It does not have to suck being old. I think it's great for many reasons. If you're ever in my town, drop by and get on my lawn. Chris Rock said it best. Now people tell you life is short. No, it's not. Life is long, especially if you make the wrong decisions. Edit. The point is, you've got time. Don't kill yourself trying to do it all now. It's never too late to start again. All in my 20s, I thought I couldn't just restart my career, or dump a useless boyfriend, or go back to school because I was already on a certain trajectory. Made my choices now, I gotta make the best of it. That's total bullshit. You have no idea how incredibly young you are, and how much time you have to do whatever you want to do. When I figured this out, I found the man of my dreams, had a kid in my late 30s, dropped my entire career in my late 40s, and started a new one at 50, and it's awesome. When I was in college, I had the chance to go to Europe, but I passed because I had to work in a warehouse. I picked staying at a part-time warehouse job overseeing the world. When I finally went abroad in my 30s, it changed my perspective about everything and everyone. Go to another country that is far away and different than your own. Cries in COVID-19. I'm 46, and here's what I know. Money is important, but it's not the end-all be-all. It will not listen to your problems or hug you when you need it. Watch your weight, your blood pressure, and do not smoke. 75% of my patients that have the most serious diagnoses have at least one of these factors. Comparison will rob you of joy. Be happy for others, but don't feel you need to be like them. Let go of the little things. Stress will kill you. Chase your dreams. Life goes by so fast. You don't want to be 80 years old and regretting not traveling, pursuing your passion, etc. You cannot change someone, whether a friend or a partner. Their faults will not get better, and you cannot rescue them. Don't waste your life on toxic people. Make a point of performing kind acts for others. It will greatly enrich your life. Now, go get your life. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. People who can express themselves clearly and make themselves understood whenever you open your mouth. How the hell do you do that? I was going to say, make sure you use the right words, but actually, it's make sure you use the right words for the right audience. Not everyone is at the same level of comprehension, so knowing what works for who is one huge hurdle to get over first. Not only words, but also the complexity as well. You can dumb things down, but your conversation partner can't just become more intelligent/educated. I'm better at expressing how I feel now than I was when I was younger. For me personally, formal higher education actually helped a lot. Spending multiple hours a day hearing other people discuss and express relatively complex thoughts made it easier to find ways to express my own thoughts. I'm the same way, and also getting into discussions about your thoughts either in a class discussion or writing papers, defending a point of view goes a really long way towards giving you the tools to understand what you need to convey to get your point of view understood. Read. A lot. It gives people a much better command of language and a broader library of ideas to draw from when expressing their own thoughts. On the other hand, as Steve Martin said, some people have a way with words. Other people not have way. Reading helps, but there's an auditory component that's important. Most people talk too fast. They talk faster than they think. I'd say listen to baseball commentary for great examples of people who speak. Also, don't rehearse in your head. Have a bullet point. You're more likely to trip up if you had exact phrasing mapped out in your head. Don't talk too fast. Don't talk too much. My old professor said this about speech. Succinctness is a virtue. Convey your idea with few words, and the listener will be more agreeable. If you convey your idea while also using low mid-level vocabulary, even better. The listener won't feel like you're talking down to them with academic words or with baby words. Why use many word when few word do trick? Practice. Arguments help as well. Debating skills are actually quite useful in being able to articulate what you're feeling into actual words. It's not uncommon for even well-spoken people to fall apart when they are under pressure. They can think of what to say before and after, but when they're under the gun, they can't spit it out. Practice makes perfect. If you make a habit of typing clearly, eloquently, and with proper grammar, it will influence the way you think. If you type like every letter is a Herculean effort, and your life depends on sending that text quickly, then that's how you will express yourself generally as well. Review everything you write, edit it, and don't hit send or post until it says exactly what you mean. I guarantee that will make speaking eloquently much easier, as you will become used to forming crisp, clear thoughts. You'll also find yourself stopping and considering what you're about to say before you say it. Also, super helpful. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What happened today that made you happy? Told my boss to sell all of my vacation time except 1 week. Turns out I had 1,040 hours saved up. Should be getting something like $15,000 this Friday. I'm happy that I have more money in my savings account alone than I had in my checking and savings combined a year ago. Money doesn't mean happiness, but the sense of relief and security is making me happy. I'll never understand the saying that money doesn't bring happiness, man. Like knowing you have a roof over your head, food in your belly, a reliable way to get to work, or not even work at all, depending on how one acquired said money and how much, and just being able to breathe sounds like a great and happy way to be. Knowing you can drop a few bills on a friend's hobby, or help out a homeless guy or something, have no debt, be able to afford health insurance, not having to worry about which kid gets new shoes this week and which one gets some next month. Money is good if used wisely and not hoarded like all of the top 1%. Peace and happiness, friend. Dollar bills and gold coins. Cheers. Money can't buy happiness, but it sure can make it easier, or something like that, paraphrasing from probably a dozen different people. The saying comes from the fact that some poor people are happy even if struggling a bit, and some rich people are unhappy. The saying wasn't supposed to mean disregard money entirely. It's supposed to mean don't hold it too highly, it's not everything. Went grocery shopping, and the guy behind me at the counter wore a shirt from my favorite band. I don't know why, but it made my day. My 87-year-old dad was declared cancer-free. I just woke up, so I haven't been up for long. That being said, I saw my wife walking around before she knew I was up. She was wearing a t-shirt and underwear. She was listening to a podcast and smiling. The sun was in her hair. It was a very nice sight. I got the craving to smoke a cigarette. I quit smoking this March due to my bad immunity and corona lockdown, and haven't smoked since then. Yet I was feeling like cheating just for today, but I didn't. I channelized my addiction into organizing my clutter, and today I didn't allow the mind voice to win. I DM'd Arnold Schwarzenegger on Reddit, and he DM'd me back. A hummingbird keeps coming to my window and hovering. No reason why, but it is fun to watch. Visited a 10-month-old baby I removed from 2 parents 2 months ago. She used to be wide-eyed, hyper-alert, and constantly crying and seeking reassurance. She's now a smiling, confident, comical baby with warm brown eyes who is thriving on the love, care, and attention from her new carers. Sometimes my job is actually worthwhile. My city had protests last night, and there was some vandalism and looting. When I drove through today, folks were out in force cleaning up. I went out today to buy groceries, and not a single business in my neighborhood was looted. I live in the southwest side of Chicago and was worried, especially since my dad said the Walgreens near him was hit. The cashier at the grocery store told me they tried to loot the little strip mall where I like to go and get wings, but the business owners and gang members protected it. It's weird to say, but it brought so much relief to me that my neighborhood was safe from those that are trying to spark chaos and creating so many hardships for small businesses that were already struggling. I got my first job. My boss told me I'm doing a good job. I underestimated how powerful yet scarce encouragement and praise can be. It's my dog's birthday. I get to give her treats all day, and she isn't even quite sure why. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader, Funeral Organizers of Reddit. What are the weirdest or most unique funerals you have organized? I've been in the funeral industry for over 10 years now, and most services I have arranged have been run-of-the-mill. Most people seem to want similar things, but one service will always stand out to me. A family asked us to play some hardcore gangster rap for their mother and grandmother at her service, and we happily obliged. I can't quite remember the name of the song, but it had heavy themes of murder, drug use, and pretty foul language. Her service was then finished with a recital of the Lord's Prayer. When my grandfather died, we had a request we were afraid was odd, but the funeral director told us he'd seen much, much stranger, so it was okay. My grandfather was big into motorcycles. He had Harleys as long as I can remember, and even after he had his hip surgery and the doctor told him not to ride anymore, he retooled his bike into a trike so he could still ride. So after he died, my uncle outfitted the trike with a special rig, very secure and very safe, so that we could take him to the cemetery in his coffin on the back of the motorcycle. My uncle drove the motorcycle while all of the members of my grandfather's riding club circled him from the funeral parlor to the cemetery. It was badass and awesome, and I know my grandfather would have loved it. As a funeral music planner and organist, I've worked with families on many funerals to honor special requests. One was a Wizard of Oz themed funeral, where the deceased woman had loved the original movie and requested that music from it be used. Pallbearers and friends of the family dressed in costumes of the principal characters as they entered the church, including dozens of munchkins, Toto, and the witch. There wasn't a dry eye after the eulogy when the soloist sang Over the Rainbow, but many smiles as the coffin was carried out of the church en route to the cemetery, as everyone sang, "We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz." Not a funeral organizer, but one of my sisters was killed by a drunk driver, so as a family we were trying to figure out what to do for her funeral and memorial. She was cremated, so we had a lovely memorial at my dad's place outside and planted a couple of trees for her. My sister had a big personality in life, and she loved to have fun and make people laugh. My other sisters and I decided that rather than wear black, we would wear the most outrageous ball gowns we could get our hands on. Mine ended up being black with peacock feathers embroidered all over. One of my sisters wore an enormous orange tutu. She would have absolutely loved it. It helped make the day a little less bitter and a little more sweet. Best non-tragic one for me. Pallbearers so drunk they could barely stand, let alone carry the casket. They agreed to wheel out on a trolley, some still holding their goon sacks, bladders used in box wine for your non-Aussies, and their free hand. Something about your mentioning not being able to carry the casket reminded me of my grandmother's funeral. She had been in denial about her imminent death right up to the very end, had refused to plan her funeral or talk about it at all with anyone. Since we had a lot of family across the country and out of the country, when she died, my grandpa decided to bury her quickly and informally and have a long, beautiful memorial for her once everyone could get there. So at the informal burial, we had no service or anything, just met at the graveyard and watched her casket be buried. There was a little confusion about getting the casket from the hearse to the grave digging truck. Only my dad, brother, and husband were strong enough to do it, meaning we were going to have to impose on the hearse driver and the gravedigger to help us. Looking around, wondering in the moment who else could help, my dad beckoned my grandpa over to carry a side of the casket. My 89-year-old grandpa. I looked at my dad like he was crazy, but my grandpa stepped forward like he was maybe going to try. In that moment, I realized my dad saw my grandpa very differently than I did. I saw him as a frail old man, which he is. My dad saw him as, well, dad. Strong, capable, that larger-than-life persona of what a man should be. My dad just had no idea how frail his father had become, because in his mind, he was and always will be dad, and everything that comes with the word. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. People who live in a rural area out in the country. What will city folk never understand? This doesn't go for all small town, but the one I live in, there is no law enforcement. We fall under the jurisdiction of a neighboring town, but it's like 45 minutes away, so the people out here just deal with incidents on their own. To be honest though, it's pretty rare that any instances occur. This right here, so many city people get all look those dumb rednecks when we talk about taking care of our own. We've got one officer on duty for our 60 square mile township. If something happens, it's probably going to be a while before they get there. Even if he isn't tied up with a DV or an overdose in one of the trailer parks, he usually is. We passed a levee, and now we've got 2 duty on Friday and Saturday nights, both still running ragged in the parks. My neighbors and I called in a guy high on meth that tried to rob me at gunpoint at my own damn gate. We chased him down and had him surrounded on foot in the middle of the state route while he waved a gun and buck knife at us, and the cars kept trying to get through. Dispatch casually told me to keep there if we could. It'll be a while. 30 minutes for a state boy to arrive. Another 10 for our township officer. Farmer working in the field across the road came over and knocked the shit out of the guy so we could get the unloaded, thankfully, gun and knife away from him. And none of it was a big deal. Just neighbors helping neighbors. Business as usual for the police. The dark. In a city at night, you can read a book outside. In the country, on a cloudy or no moon night, you can't see anything. Not like it's kinda hard to see, but it's so dark you might as well be blind. The stars and gravity are the only way to know which direction is up. Also, a clear night sky in places that get truly dark like that is something my vocabulary can't describe. When a road sign says last gas for however many kilometers, it means it. Yeah, we get so many people who drive through here asking if it really is the last gas station for miles. The answer is yes. Some don't believe us, and we see them again when they get towed to the mechanics across the street for running out of gas and ruining their engine by trying to make it to the next one. Others do, and they stock up, and we never see them again. I work at that gas station, and it's pretty interesting seeing just how many people pass through but don't realize they're in a town. It's like Radiator Springs from Cars, but in Ohio. We have pretty much everything we need besides a grocery store, but it's all run down and falling apart. Seeing deer isn't a special occasion. Those f***ers are always showing up. The extent of our pantries and freezers. We can't just run to the store to pick up that forgotten ingredient or spur of the moment craving. But if we're well stocked, we can whip up just about anything. Small towns aren't one size fits all. There's a lot of difference. The town I'm from has 300-ish people and hits every single negative stereotype imaginable. But an hour away, there's a town of 1,500 that is basically the poster child for good country living. I've also found they don't understand the physical toll working in certain trades can take. Also, driving an hour isn't considered a long trip where I'm from. The reality is your neighbors are nosy little f***ers. They don't have a life and want to know what goes on in others. My dad grew up in central Missouri. He still owns the house, and down the road a ways, he owns about 200 acres. He lives about 2 hours away. I live about 5 hours away. Once or twice a year, my family and I will head down to the property when my dad's down there working on it. Without fail, every time the neighbor, who lives about a half-mile down the road, comes up on his four-wheeler to see what's going on. My dad tells me that the week after I come down, the old man comes over and says, "Sure were a lot of people down here last week." Yep. Both my dad's car and my car drove past his house to get to our property. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Active U.S. military personnel of Reddit. What are your thoughts and feelings about possibly being deployed to quell the protests that are occurring across the nation? Just got back from 9-month deployment in the Middle East. It makes me really sad to see what happened in the time I left. The thought of possibly having to organize and gear up in my own country is really troubling. This is not the way I wanted to come home. As an active duty Air Force officer currently deployed, it is my moral and legal obligation to disobey an unlawful order. It is not our job nor our duty to quell peaceful protests. America is not an authoritarian state. If asked to ensure protests remain peaceful and respond to open acts of hostility, that may be a different story, but it depends on circumstance. These are questions that we, officers, military members in general, ponder constantly, both in private with our peers and in our thoughts. What would we do? How far would we go? It is a thought-provoking and frightening time we live in when there is a real possibility of active duty members being used inside the United States. That is not our intended purpose. An argument could be made that it would be during a civil war, but that of the Guard and Reserves. I trust my commanding officers to make the right decisions based on defending the Constitution and our country, while following the law of armed conflict and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That trust does not, however, absolve me of my own responsibility should it fall to me. I got out of the Army in 2007, worked as a military contractor after that until 2015. I told my wife this morning that I'm so glad to not be in the military right now because I would end up in prison for disobeying orders if I were to be deployed to combat protests. I joined up in 2000 with the wildly naive idea that it was the military's job to protect the Constitution. After nearly a decade of working for and with the military, I'm afraid to admit that I'm not convinced military personnel and their leaders have been equipped to decide what constitutes a lawful order. I recognize that I've had no association with the military for 5 years now, and things change. This is simply my observation. I did 30 years in the British Army. Thankfully, I only had to do one tour in Ulster. Using the military as policemen is generally a piss-poor option. They aren't trained in the same way as police, nor do they carry the same kit. It reduces options in the chain of escalation. It will almost certainly result in more deaths. I only did about a day in counter-riot training. The officers had some extra training in how to manage the situations, but none of this prepares you for a real riot. Someone will have to write up ROE for this. Ours was essentially an umbrella job for the politicians, hence the continuing investigations into a veteran's 40 years on. Luckily, I'm currently mobilized out of America and also work in a medical unit, and I'm also in the reserves, so don't have to worry about it. But honestly, it would be real difficult to stand in my uniform in full gear across from my fellow citizens during all this. I'd much rather be standing on their side. If I got called up during this, I'd probably start drinking beforehand. I likely won't be called to do the quelling, but it's a situation. There are serious injustices being done by the police that need answered for. Peaceful protest is fine and completely within our rights. Hell, in my opinion, even clashing with the police is fine because at least the anger is directed at the people who sparked it. But burning and looting business that had nothing to do with anything is senseless and an injustice in itself. The local owners and workers are putting in the work trying to make a living like anyone else, and in the past, big corporations have simply refused to rebuild, taking those jobs away. It takes away from the very legitimate arguments being made. That needs to stop, and I don't mind doing my part if asked to do so. Quelling riots, not protests. I would have a huge problem with stopping protests, even the flag-burning ones, because everyone has a First Amendment right to speech and assembly. Riots, less of a problem. The oath is to support and defend the Constitution, and it says right in the preamble, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. That absolutely does not mean the military should be going house to house shooting civilians. That is what our corrupt and unaccountable police forces are for. Helping to guard and secure private property and the lives of innocent people is an effort I have no problem with. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. People who have attended weddings where someone objected. What happened? My wife was at a wedding where everyone wanted to object, but no one did. Everyone there except the priest and the groom knew the bride had been sleeping with the best man for the entire engagement. At the reception, the bride and the best man snuck off because they both thought it would be sexy to f*** in her wedding dress. 8 years later, the husband still has no idea, and they still hang out with his best man very frequently. My one cousin's wedding. This was in Ireland, so not the States, so weddings are very religious over there if you are a Catholic. We were just sitting there while the priest was talking. One of his friends got up and said, "Connor," not his real name, "I should have told you earlier, but she slept with me and one of our mutual cousins. He claimed he wouldn't be a good Catholic if he let it slide. Everyone gasped, but both my cousins pressed him. His story crumbled like crazy. My uncle punched him in the face, and we waited like 45 minutes. The priest said, "I don't endorse violence, but he deserved it." The wedding continued, and all went well. Only other thing that happened is cop took statements from a few people, including my uncle and the priest who didn't leave yet. Fun fact, the actual wording of the question asked if anybody knows any lawful reason why the marriage should not take place. In other words, if one of them is already married, or one is underage, or if the marriage is being forced, etc. She can't marry him because she's in love with me, only happens in the movies. Next wedding I'm at, priest. Does anyone know any lawful reason these two should not be married today? Speak now, or forever hold your peace. Me. Your fathership. I know of no less than 500 counts of this here groom jaywalking in his 30 years of walking so far. Not only must he consider himself an outlaw to society, but he is opening his bride up to an immense financial liability if he were to continue flaunting the laws we hold so sacred. Let's say they both live till death do them part at 90. I project he'll jaywalk another 1,500 times minimum, which could carry with it approximately $150,000 in fines and who knows how many court fees and relationship strains down the road. A road the groom has most certainly crossed illegally. Your bishopness, I rest my case. I didn't know these people then, but some of my friends who work at Disney did a wedding where they all had a part to play to make the wedding as chaotic and stereotypical as possible. There was the child who tasted the cake before everyone else ate, the drunk uncle, the people who proposed at the wedding, the underdressed cousin who made it all about themselves, the objector, the crashers, and a bunch more. There were like 100 people there. It really seemed like a fun wedding that only a bunch of theater kids could pull off. Nothing. The mom was a crazy jealous lady, and of course the husband was mature enough not to let anything ruin his or his wife's big day. So in the end, he no longer speaks to her for disrespecting him and his wife. Some moms are so controlling and toxically jealous that they can't see past their jealousy and feel entitled for their needs to be met before their own adult kids' needs. The only thing you can do is cut ties with all of them. A lot of moms ruin their sons' lives just because they want their needs met. I've seen many miserable boys marry girls their moms choose only to live a life longing for the one they let go. So I'm glad this guy did the right thing. Guys, take notes. Not necessarily objected, however, I was about to marry my beloved when officers arrived and told me that I needed to go with them. I was just as confused as my guest, but went with them, saying that it was likely a misunderstanding. Little did I know that I had been framed for being a part of the Bonapartist faction. Another man's jealousy had landed me in jail. My accusers wanted me to fail, but I pushed forward. Using my wits, I made my escape. I had learned that not only had 14 years passed since I was incarcerated, but my father had actually died and my beloved Mercedes had married another and had actually had a child with him. 14 years had passed. My face had altered dramatically. I could barely recognize my own reflection. I used this to my advantage as I plotted vengeance against my accusers. I've done AV work for churches as a side gig ever since high school, so I've worked at tons of weddings at several different churches with many different officiants. It's a nice way to earn a few bucks just for sitting around at a soundboard for an hour. I don't believe I have ever heard the "forever hold your peace" question asked in real life. I asked a preacher about it once. He said, "What good could possibly come from asking that?" There are definitely weddings where it does happen, but normal modern Protestant weddings in the U.S., it's not a requirement, and certainly not as common as movies and TV would have you think. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Autopsy Doctors of Reddit. What was the biggest revelation you had to a person's death after you carried out the procedure? Worked at an animal hospital. They did necropsies for zoos all the time. An alligator died and they shipped it to the hospital, refrigerated, etc. to stop the decay. They took it out and put it on the table. After doing all the paperwork, they started opening up the alligator. After the first cut, the alligator opened its eyes. Turns out, it wasn't dead. The zoo vet mistook an illness for death, and the low temperature put it basically into a coma. Edit. Unfortunately, this is all the information I know on this story. It's been 7 years since I worked at that place. This reminds me of a guy in Florida that was picking up dead iguanas. It had gotten so cold they would fall out of the trees dead. Except they weren't dead and sprung back to life as they warmed up in his car. He crashed, but was fine. I worked at a coroner's office for a while, and once we had a guy who we thought had died from an OD on meth. Well, we started the autopsy and I went to cut his lungs out, and blueberry muffin mix started coming out of them. I stuck my finger in his mouth and it was full of blueberry muffin mix. And it was in his throat. Turns out, he got just high enough to pass out while eating the muffin mix, and he ended up choking to death. I did the autopsy of both a robber and his victim. The robber shot the victim in the back when he tried to escape in a motorcycle, and the robber was shot by the police in the exact same situation. What's interesting is that they both died by exactly the same lesion. Both of them had their fourth lumbar vertebra shattered and their aorta, main artery of the body, sectioned at the same level. I thought of it like an extreme example of instant karma. During my internship rotation a couple of years back, a 40-year-old guy came in because he suddenly collapsed while drinking with friends. He came in unresponsive, mouth bleeding, and not breathing, so we had to intubate him. For some reason, the endotracheal tube, the stiff tube placed inside the trachea to help the patient breathe, won't go in. But we managed to suction out copious amounts of blood clots. After CPR, still with unsuccessful intubation, so we had to bag him with a face mask, the patient was declared dead and diagnosed with a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. During the autopsy, they found out that the guy was apparently shot by a gun from the top of the head. The entry wound was obscured by his hair, and it was barely bleeding at all, and the bullet somehow went through the back of the guy's throat, making a hole behind the base of the tongue, which the endotracheal tube kept slipping into. Training in the medical examiner's office. Elderly woman found dead by herself in her home. There was nothing suspicious, so I was given the case. Took out all the organs, dissected everything, completely unremarkable. I cut through the larynx as the last step before I could clean up and finish the case, and boom, giant piece of chicken lodged in her windpipe, died choking on dinner. Not a doctor, but a whole-body scientific donation technician. I'm the person who dissects cadavers after they were donated. We very commonly would get young cases, normally overdoses. Had a mid-30s female, went to medical examiner prior to donation, but they only did an external evaluation. I went to check her genitals to see if I could palpate a uterus, found a condom full of pills. Similar to most, the body became a crime scene and we couldn't touch her. When we were finally able to continue, they asked us to photograph the pills to send to the examiner's office. They were mostly Advil and Zyrtec, easily one of the weirdest things I've ever found. When my parents were in medical school, they attended an autopsy of a patient who had died in a car accident. Autopsy revealed that apparently this guy had survived a chest shot in Vietnam years ago, that the surgeons and medics left in rather than perform risky surgery, the accident had migrated the bullet to his heart and was ruled the cause of death. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What golden nugget of information do you have to share? Monkeys have a very distinct way of wanking off, and yes, they do wank themselves, which in contrast to normal human male way of forming a tube with their hands, creates a shovel with their hand and cup their genitalia from under, and repeatedly rub it. I don't watch monkeys jack off, I just saw it in a documentary. In the center courtyard of the Pentagon, you don't have to salute superior officers. It's a recreation lunch area, and you'd basically spend the whole time saluting, so it's not required there. Source: my uncle, a Navy corpsman who currently works at the Pentagon. Stonehenge, the world's most famous henge, isn't actually a henge. A henge is a Neolithic earthworks, oval or circular in shape, sometimes containing wooden or stone structures and surrounded by a perimeter of a bank with internal ditch. So the famous stones of Stonehenge aren't even a necessary part of a henge, just an optional extra. But more importantly, the bank and ditch at Stonehenge are the wrong way round to make it an official henge. So Stonehenge isn't a henge. However, the earliest recorded use of the word henge is in reference to Stonehenge, so non-henge. Stonehenge, despite not being a henge, is the thing all other henges are named after. If you don't have a toilet plunger and you've clogged it up, Pour in a bit of dish soap and some hot water. The hotter the better. Let stand for 15 minutes and flush. Learned this when immediately upon arriving at our hotel. My 8-year-old clogged up our toilet and I Googled. Found this gem. Realized I'd packed a tiny travel bottle of dish soap, warmed up the water in the microwave, and lo and behold, it worked. I still use it sometimes at home when I don't want to be grossed out by plunging. Yes, my child has a tendency to clog toilets, so there you go. X% of Y is the same as Y% of X. So if you're struggling to find 26% of 50, maybe 50% of 26, 13, is much easier to do quickly. Horses have a massive blind spot on the front and back of their body. If you are ever around a tame horse, keep a hand on their body while walking around them. This lets it know where you are at all times and decreases chances of kicking out of shock or fear. This also prevents them from kicking you with as much force. You need to stay very close to them for the full benefit. This is similar with goats, as they instinctively fight things coming head-on and should be approached from the sides. Control-Shift-Escape opens straight to the Task Manager, instead of Control-Alt-Delete and then manually selecting Task Manager. Even though you have a VPN, it doesn't necessarily keep you hidden if skilled people wanted to find you. There are many things that can leak your IP that you have to isolate and fix, such as IPv6 leaks, DNS leaks, and WebRTC leaks. Also, every add-on you add to your browser, it gives you a unique fingerprint that can lead back to you. You're not as secure as you think. Joke's on you, I used incognito mode. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb way a spouse has tried to screw the other? I am not a lawyer, but work in the court system. One case that came in was a couple divorcing on mutual terms. The husband had one child with her, and the wife had a child from the previous marriage. He agreed to pay child support for both children. I guess he really cared about this other enough to support her even though it is not his obligation. Judge signs the order, they go to set up the child support account, and it gets kicked back saying you can't have 2 accounts for one child. Turns out she's been collecting child support from the biological father the entire time and never told him. She basically tried to milk 2 fathers for one child, and the other attorney knew about it. Not my case, but during the first year of law school, lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of different areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of a rather well-to-do couple that spent months and months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything, all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember the significance, but somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided, they spent many more months and nearly $100,000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps and smashed the ceramic ashtray. Left the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. Decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. Once had a boss who had to leave his house for 6 hours while his ex-wife grabbed all the belongings she was legally entitled to. When he returned home, every knob and handle was gone. Doorknobs, cabinet handles, drawer handles, anything that was screwed onto something and used to open it, she had taken. Every day for the next week, he would occasionally yell out, "She took the f***ing knobs!" I am an interpreter who works frequently with police and lawyers. The most out there thing I ever interpreted in court went like this. "Ms. So-and-so, we know each other for a long time, correct?" "Yes." "As a matter of fact, we have known each other for 5 years, correct?" "Yes." "And at the end of each and every meeting we had during the past 5 years, we always agreed on one thing, correct?" "Yes." "Please tell the judge what we agree on." "It's not okay to break in my ex's apartment and lick all his cutlery." Yet here we are, Ms. So-and-so. I didn't handle the divorce, I handled parts of the aftermath. In the divorce, she went AWOL, was living in a truck somewhere, and just couldn't handle it mentally. He gave her 5 of his 9 companies. They were the ones that owed 7 figures in payroll taxes. He had made her the bookkeeper on paper. She spent decades trying to shake the IRS for the results. When you're about to go through a divorce, don't clean out the accounts and hide the money. Grab your pets and put them in a safe place where nobody will ever find them until the divorce is all long over. A soon-to-be ex-husband left his wife's prized koi to die on the doorstep of their house. Apparently the value of these fish, 6 in total, was over $100,000. She was, according to her lawyer, so distraught that she couldn't be in court, only in LA. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Teachers of Reddit, when did you realize a kid was gifted? We took standardized tests like the second week of school. Hadn't really done much academics yet as it was elementary school, grade 5, and most of what we'd done was routine and introductions, games. Kids scored at a 10th grade level in math and a 9th grade level in reading. Okay, whatever. Impressive, but not unheard of. Except this kid was at the worst school in the state. Literally, ranked dead last. His whole schooling career. Nobody else in my class scored above a 6th grade level in anything, and most were 3rd or 4th grade level. I basically had to do entirely separate lesson plans for this kid. While the rest of my class did multiplication facts, I had a coding curriculum and was teaching him basic languages. He had his own reading group, in addition to the high reading group. It was even more incredible because he'd always been in trouble and in the principal's office years before. I sent him to ISS once, all year. Really low for that school. Kids in other classes went literally daily. I had a few go once a week. I begged his mom to switch him out of that school track, said I'd fill out any paperwork, write any letters. It was my only year as a teacher. Not sure what happened to him. Mom never contacted me. He finished the year by shattering all of his records on testing exams. Literally, the 0.01% on his test. He's legitimately one of the smartest kids I'd ever met, from the poorest school with the worst conditions I've ever seen. After less than a year of music lessons, it was clear the student would likely become a concert pianist when he learned 15 of Bach's 2-part inventions from memory and played them brilliantly. Username checks out. This kid was always bright but never really inspired by much of what he did. Seemed a little lazy, but wasn't troublesome. He was just kind of a neutral kid in the class. We did one day of Lewis structures, and he thought it was too easy. Gave him a harder worksheet which he finished in like 3 seconds. So I gave him an organic formula that had 12 different isomers and some resonance structures. He came up with all of them in less than 15 minutes, including ones that had to do with how the object would look in 3D, even though we never covered it. Kid is currently working on his PhD at Yale in organic chemistry. I knew when he surprised me by reassembling an engine out of a car all by himself in a single 90-minute class period. It was right before school let out for COVID. I had to hurry up and get some projects thrown back together quickly since school was closing. He asked to do it, so I let him try and went off to do other things. By the end of the class, it was completely assembled. Never asked me for help, and it was working. Definitely gifted. My sister was 20 and had an old Civic. My dad is a mechanic and came home from work to find she had taken half the engine out, cleaned and sprayed it pink, and reinstalled all the parts herself with no help. He was so impressed he started her apprenticeship, first female in the company, a week later. And 6 years later, she was headhunted to another company and is part of a pit crew for a rally car, and also has her own race car, which is actually her first Civic that she souped up herself. An interesting test for toddlers is to see if they can hold an extended back-and-forth conversation with adults. Most kids at this age, and most grown-ass adults, are just asking for something or telling you something. I was at the park one day swinging my ex's 5-year-old daughter. There was what seemed to be a 1.5-year-old or less child swinging next to mine. I swear, we ended up having a full-blown conversation. The child's enunciation was on point. It was as if I was in a Geico commercial. I asked the mom how the child could possibly speak that well, as it seemed inhuman. She said the dad is a children's speech pathologist. Coach's kid, every time. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What is the most severe case of someone being completely out of touch with reality you've ever seen? This is my time to shine. So I grew up with a lot of restrictions that at the moment had no idea the options existed. For example, I was allowed two options of shoes, but the catch was that I need to make the right choice. Or that I can make friends of my own, not needing to be told this is your new friend now, so go play with them. Sadly, my dad kept me in a small box, and he was the only one allowed to control what would go into that box or come out. So when I was 10, CPS was involved and was taken into foster care. That's when my world exploded. I didn't know truly how bad it was until they took me to a shoe store and told me to pick out ones I liked. I swear, for the life of me, I had no clue what to do. I stood there for what felt was hours until they noticed and asked what my favorite color was. I said green because that's what my father told me I liked. But I guess I was too overwhelmed that I just remember saying yes to everything and ended up with ugly brown and pink sneakers. What children learn to do at their normal age is what I am just figuring it out in my 20s. So reality was a hard thing to live because the whole time I was in my dream world. I was at a bar and some guy was giving an impromptu lecture of why millennials are so broke and blamed it all on us being lazy students who don't want to work and go to school. When asked what he did, he was a property owner and owned a few apartment buildings. Then someone chimes up with the fact he doesn't own any properties. He manages them for his uncle, who pays him to do nothing all day. My friend stole my card info and bought loads of expensive stuff. I asked her if it was her before reporting it, knowing that A, she was going through a tough time and I wanted to give her a chance to make it right, and B, that I could be in trouble for conspiracy to fraud if I reported it and they believed I'd gotten stuff delivered to my friend to claim fraud for the money back. She said no. I thought someone else had done it, so I reported it. When she got arrested, she said she didn't think they'd take the fraud thing so far. She thought you could just call up banks to get the money back and they wouldn't investigate. I have an aunt who's never really worked a day in her life because her husband created his own business early on in life. They live in a McMansion, and I was over once and we got to talking about fitness, and she told me, "Oh yeah, we send Pamela to this special training gym. It's only $200 a week. You should try it." The fact that to her it was only $200 really kills me. I made $9.95 an hour at the time. She's nice enough but not in touch with reality at all. Had a friend who insisted she was in a relationship with a C-list celebrity whom she met once during a comic convention. All the celebrity's Instagram and Twitter posts were for her, and everything had a meaning behind it. When the celebrity got married, she said that it was just for the media, so she and celebrity could live a quiet life. When he didn't do anything for her birthday, she had a breakdown. She went to therapy not long after. My cousin was spoiled and sheltered her entire childhood through college. Then her parents stupidly cut the leash without any preparation and released her into society. She quickly got in trouble for bouncing checks all over town. My mom picked her up and asked why the hell she was writing bad checks everywhere. Turns out, my cousin was under the impression that as long as you had checks in your checkbook, you had money in your account. She didn't understand that you deposit in a number and then can spend or withdraw up to that amount. Please teach your kids basic finance. Note, this was like 1996 before it turns into a who writes a check anymore discussion. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. If you were ultra rich, what frivolous service would you pay for? Along the same lines, I've decided that if I win the lottery, I'm not going to quit my job. I'm going to start speaking my mind until I get fired. Someone to wake me up really nice and gently in the morning, like turning the lights red, opening the blinds maybe, setting a cup of coffee next to me, and then that same person to tuck me in at night. I can't think of a better frivolous service. I would buy the distribution rights to all the 80s, 90s, 2000s TV shows I liked that were never released on DVD or streaming and put them out in HD, mostly so I can watch them. A personal assistant. I really hate going to the post office, grocery shopping, getting my car washed and filling it up, and other fiddly errands of that nature. If I had the money, I'd definitely pay someone else to do that for me. Personal shampooer. I love getting my hair washed. I'd have my own personal chef. I love good food, but cooking can be a bit of a hassle sometimes. Also, if the chef is ordering all the ingredients and cooking all the food, it would make it a lot easier to eat healthy and stick to diets. I always wanted to live in a blimp. It would be an old-fashioned looking dirigible like from the 19th century, but modern behind all appearance with a balcony and floor section made in plexiglass for the view, like people living on a boat, but better. All those subscription box services that look really cool, but are ultimately monumental wastes of money. For example, the international snack boxes. A town crier to walk around my neighborhood saying, 2 o'clock and all's well. A distant low rumble of thunder every time someone said my name. Failing that, probably an air fryer from Costco. World's largest greenhouse filled with all that manner of fruit and veg purely cultivated and propagated for flavor, attended by an army of botanists and gardeners. I'm so sick of the flavor shit in supermarkets. I want some Bakia levels of QC. I would hire someone to scratch and tickle my back anytime I wanted it. Yep, I know it's weird. It's my favorite thing and I never get it. When my dogs snuggle my back, I almost cry and I'm instantly calmed. Private luxury airship. F the yacht. It can only go where there's water. Custom-made tailored clothing. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to wear every day because I know what I'm going to look like and they always have my size. Maybe some days I want to go business casual, or maybe some days I want to go full-on wizard in robes. The possibilities are limitless. I don't know if it's frivolous, kinda seems like it is when you are pretty much paycheck to paycheck, but I'd like to hire a trainer and have regular gym time. Maybe take some yoga classes to try to fix my back. Hiring a bunch of people to be a living chessboard. Edit, so many of y'all want it to be a battle to the death. What the hell? Seriously, I don't want to put humans against humans to the death for this. That's kind of f***ed up. My inspiration was The Simpsons, not Hunted. If I did this in this extremely hypothetical situation, I'd want to have like 2 or 3 sets of people to take shifts, and I'd like to pay them full time, and be able to give them all the health benefits. I'd want to treat them well. I love Snoop Dogg and his joint roller. He pays someone $40,000 a year just to roll joints for him, 35 hours a week. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What's the most badass thing you've accidentally said in the heat of the moment? We had an overly dramatic neighbor who always claimed she was sick and dying. My mom came to see my kids in the middle of battling stage 4 lung cancer. The neighbor pulled her. "Hi Rita, so glad to see you. Did Jason tell you that I am dying?" My mom looked right at her, smiled and said, "Me too, dear, but not today." Never more proud of her. This one had a little setup, but I think it's funny enough to share. At a family vacation, my grandmother was giving me grief for not remembering her birthday. I've never been good with birthdays. After telling me it was the password to her iPhone, she wanted me to take a picture with it, which is why I needed the password. While she was distracted, I opened up the settings, changed her password to my birth date, and then set her phone down. Cue, 15 minutes later, she's trying to get into her iPhone and it's not working. Suspecting mischief, she grumpily asked me if I've changed the password to her phone in front of our entire family. I admit that I did. "Well, what is it?" she asked impatiently. "It's my birth date." She sat there in stunned silence for about 15 seconds, not being able to remember my birthday before our family exploded laughing. It was a good time. Around the time I was 12, I was at a family party with my dad and aunts and uncles. My dad told me that one of the uncles owned several bars. My response? "Oh, it's good that he got into a business that he knows something about." I had no idea what I really was saying. I thought I was giving him a compliment. Kids can give the most innocently yet devastatingly accurate assessments possible. They're like cursed mirrors that reflect back all your flaws, both physically and philosophically. When I was young, I told my mom when I grow up I want to be fat like you. She tried to explain why it's not good, but I didn't understand it because she was the best pillow. This was back in my junior year of college. At the beginning of the semester, I was introducing myself to my very intimidating biochemistry professor. Guy was a genius, but also a hard ass. Students were all terrified to ask him questions because he was known for grilling people, and if they hadn't made enough effort beforehand, he'd send them out of his office to learn on their own. As I walked into his office, he was sorting through some boxes and made a really sarcastic comment regarding stuffing me in the box and shipping it off somewhere. He looked up for my response, and I just blurted out without thinking, "I wouldn't mind going somewhere nice." Dude laughed so hard it actually startled me a little. We got along pretty well for the remainder of the semester, so it all worked out really well. It's amazing what a little laughter can do to ease the tension. I actually said nothing. I was on my motorcycle in traffic on a wet overpass with short jersey walls. Guy behind me was driving a bit too fast and slammed on his brakes, sliding into me, but no damage as he was going slow enough to touch me and push me about 5 feet before finally coming to a stop. The angle had me going straight forward, so I did not fall. Had it been much faster, I would have been thrown over the edge to my death, so obviously, I was, not happy. I turned off the engine, got off the bike, and slowly walked over to the driver that hit me. It's only a few feet, and when he saw me coming to him, he furiously started raising his manual window, so I could just see him struggling to pump the winder. When I got there, I just knocked on his window, pointed at him, and turned around and walked away. He looked terrified. I didn't think about it until later. A guy you just hit in a car wearing a black helmet with shaded visor, black heavy thick jacket, black heavy riding pants, roadcrafter jacket and pants, black thick and metal studded gloves, and black leather boots knocks on your window and points at you for being a supreme dumbass. I had no idea. I just wanted to talk to him, be a bit angry but tell him I was okay, then take a sec to verify my bike was okay as well. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Who deserved what happened to them, but you still felt bad? Might be a little late, but here it goes. A couple of years ago, I had a soccer ball that a kid stole from me. He said it was his and he found it. Well, cut to a couple weeks later, I went to the park and that kid was there playing with my ball. Then some homeless-looking person walked to where the kid had his stuff placed and stole his bag. I saw everything that happened. I still feel bad for not doing anything, but to be fair, he did not return my ball after I asked many times. Karma's a bitch, David. Back a long time ago, growing up in Eastern Europe, before the Cold War was ended, I had a friend who kept getting into trouble. Vandalism, stealing from stores, drugs, and more. He had been arrested 2 times, but kept thinking he can get away with it. This was back when the farm pit punishment was still used for some crimes. Basically where you're locked in a pit on a farm for a day or 2, and the dung of the animals on the farm is shoveled in as well. I warned him that he better stop, because he's sure to get the farm pit if he's caught again. He seemed unconcerned and laughed it off, and said something like, "So what? It's just a day or 2. I can deal with a bad smell." I said, "Are you kidding me? Have you even been to a pig farm before? You do not want to go to the pit." But he was undistressed. Sure enough, he was caught shoplifting a few months later and spent a half day in the pit, and later told me how much he puked and how sick he felt. I warned you, buddy. When I was 19, this guy asked me on a date. I said sure. He picked me up and said that he needed to make a stop first. We go into his house, and a bunch of guys are literally weighing and bagging up weed and coke in the living room. I was shocked. Apparently, my date was a dealer unbeknownst to me. I was scared, so I just sat there quietly. He ends up saying that we should just have dinner there. So we got into his furnished basement where he had a bar and gives me a hard lemonade. As the time passes, I say I want to leave, and he forced himself on me and held me down after I kept saying no. He tried to take my shorts off. I literally sprinted out of his house and ran a few blocks, knocked on a stranger's door, and asked to use their phone to call my mom to come get me. 2 years ago, I read online that he just got a job in waste management. He was hanging off the back of the garbage truck when the driver reversed it into a metal telephone pole and crushed him. Sad he went that way, but I couldn't help but say, karma is a bitch. My sister's ex is a bastard. He always said she was too fat and there were prettier girls than her. He also took her to Paris when my parents disagreed. We found out later that she didn't even have a passport with her. He threatened to throw fireworks at our house if my sister wasn't allowed to come to a party. She was 17 at the time, so my parents were still in charge. The worst thing he did was get drunk behind the wheel. When my sister said something about it, she was given the choice, either walk 20 to 30 miles or get in the car with him. He had an accident after getting drunk behind the wheel, and he is now in a coma. There is a good chance that he will not survive. I am very sorry for his family, but I am a little happy that my sister was not in the car. I was in elementary school kicking a ball back and forth with a couple of buddies when the school bully comes over. At this time, he is damn near the size of a teenager, and I'm a super scrawny stick. He boots our ball all the way across the playground. My buddies accept the fate, but it causes me to snap. I call him a bold move for quite little me. He doesn't take that well, grabs me, turns me upside down, and slams me on my head. I pop right back up and get in his face. We repeat this several times until the teacher finally sees this and breaks it up. Fast forward to our senior year of high school. He is a real big dude at this point, still a shithead. He's talking to a Samoan kid we have at school, very rural place of mostly backwoods white kids. Starts getting physical with him. Samoan kid is probably 5'6" at best, but Samoans don't have a reputation for being badass for nothing. He grabs this giant, turns him upside down, and pile drives him into the tile floor. Bully goes completely out. Ambulance had to be called in, he gets stretchered out. We didn't see him again for several weeks. No one says to Samoan kid because he was a super chill kid and everyone, including the adults, knew how awful the bully was. Saw the bully a few years later and the incident seemed to knock the attitude out of him. He was very cordial. I feel guilty about how much glee I get about seeing this poor kid who most likely had a bad home life getting dropped on his head so hard he had to spend time in the hospital. He could have been seriously hurt. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Reddit, what up did you manage to correct before anyone noticed? And what could have happened in case you had failed? Up numerous times working on live applications. The best one was accidentally deleting the user table. I was trying to delete a subset of users and managed to hit the key to run the statement before I'd written the where clause. If you don't have a where clause to tell the database which records you want to delete, it just deletes all of them. Luckily, the user table was only ever read by the application on login, so no one was going to notice unless they happened to log in the 2 minutes or so it took me to load the records back in from a backup. Working at a laboratory that used acid solutions to dissolve geological samples for various tests. My technical manager left a component of a machine in a plastic beaker filled halfway with concentrated hydrofluoric acid, unlabeled, in a fume hood that other people use regularly, to see what it would do. I dumped it in a neutralizer and this asshole had the balls to yell at me for ruining his test. I told him it would etch and dissolve the part because it was glass and he didn't require a test because that's already a known property. Had someone spilled it, even on a gloved hand, the hydrofluoric acid would pass through protection and enter the bloodstream without sensation, where it would leach calcium out of the bones, wreaking havoc on the nervous system, causing a horrible, agonizing death. Was going on a 3-night backpacking trip with friends. It was my job to round up the 3 breakfasts. At REI, I picked up what I thought were 6 packages of freeze-dried eggs hanging from a peg. Turns out only the first was eggs. The ones behind it were Neapolitan ice cream. The packages were identical, only a small label indicated the contents. Fortunately for me, the first day and night of the trip, we were harassed so badly by biting flies and mosquitoes, everyone wanted to abandon the trip, as nobody brought bug spray. I only discovered my mistake days later, bullet dodged. I used to work in transcripts for a well-known university. You had the option to order a copy of your transcript or a digital certified PDF stating that you received whatever degree you earned. One day, I was trying to help a student troubleshoot an issue with not receiving this PDF, so I sent it to myself as a test. I then realized that even after this form was sent out, it was still editable by students. In theory, people could claim to have any degree from that university, and it would still say it was a certified document. I brought it to my superior's attention, and IT obviously fixed it pretty quickly. Technically, those old editable ones are still out there, though. Edit. To clarify for those who's asking, this wasn't my f***up, I was just the one who found it. I once had a roommate who didn't speak English too well. She was moving away and she was leaving in a hurry, and before she left, she asked me to take care of a big bag of trash, which was apparently clothes. I assumed those were trash she didn't want to take with her, and she just didn't have time to throw them away. So once she left, I took that bag to the trash canister outside. A few hours later, that interaction just came back to my mind and seemed strange to me. I went back to the trash canister, the bag was still there, and brought it back inside. The next day, she came back and got it and thanked me for taking care of it. She was a nice poor girl from a rural region that was already struggling in the city, and I don't want to think about what would have happened if I had to tell her that I threw her clothes into the trash. I was working on a case where I was responsible for preparing deposition outlines for the partners. One of the partners was very high touch and kept sending his outline back for minor revisions, and between that, other work on the case, and high priority work on other cases, I wasn't able to start working on one of the outlines until the day before the witness's deposition was scheduled. I opened the binder of documents for the witness, and there were like 400 documents in there, each of which I had to read, analyze in the context of the case, and then write questions for the partner to ask the witness about the document at deposition. To make matters worse, the partner who would be taking the dep was just brought onto the case and wasn't entirely up to speed on all the issues, so I had to prepare all of his questions in as detailed and thorough a manner as possible. I had no idea how much material there was for this witness before I opened the binder, and for that much material, there was no way in hell I'd be able to finish the outline in time. To put it bluntly, I was fucked. With nothing else to do, I start working furiously on the outline. Perhaps 10 minutes later, I get a call from the lead partner. Stop working. The case just settled. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. What's the fastest you've seen a crowd go from excited to horrified? During a Buffalo Sabres game, Clint Malarchuk took an ice skate to the neck, severing his carotid artery and partially cutting his jugular vein. He almost bled out on the ice. The sight was so horrifying, 2 fans had heart attacks and 11 others fainted. Numerous fans vomited at the sight of all the blood. Malarchuk thought he was going to die on the ice, so his only thought was getting off the ice so his mom didn't have to watch him die on TV. He asked for a priest and had the equipment manager call his mom to tell her he loved her. The only reason he didn't die is the Sabres athletic trainer was a combat medic in Vietnam. My parents were at the game and said that most of the fans assumed the worst, and seeing the ice turn red was one of the more horrifying things they'd seen in person. I was at a Bo Burnham show where he was recording for a hit Netflix special, but unfortunately this part didn't make the cut. He was cracking jokes as usual, then asked everyone in the audience to crack their knuckles on the count of 3. It was the most horrifying evil sound any of us had ever heard. I was at a Russell Peters stand-up show in a large theater. He starts some banter with the guy in the first row who had a huge tattoo on his arm saying Skylar, or similar name. He asks all about Skylar. It's the guy's daughter. He starts making jokes about daughters, some sexual innuendos, etc., and then asks how old Skylar is. The guy in the audience goes, "She passed away." It was pure crickets after that. I was at a 4th of July fireworks show in Fort Walton, Destin, Florida. The show was being staged from the inlet from the Gulf of Mexico to the bay. People were watching it from the other side of the inlet, the Highway 98 bridge, and from their boats on the water. The first salvo launched, but none of the shells exploded, either in the launch tube or just above, and ignited the rest of the show on the ground. Some launched a little bit before exploding. What was supposed to be a 30 to 40 minute show lasted 1 to 2 minutes. As the first shells blew up, I could see the silhouette of the technicians as they ran, like a stop-motion movie. The technicians were cool as hell since none of them were looking back at the explosions. I never realized how big the bursts were until I saw them going off on the ground. Everybody was trying to get away. We were being hit by pieces of fireworks. They weren't just landing on everybody, they were hitting us. My dad started the boat, but realized we couldn't move. A lot of kids were watching the show while they floated in the water. We were yelling at the other boats to stop because of the kids in the water. Fortunately enough, people heard, listened, or realized what the problem now was, so they stopped and locked everybody in place. Nobody was seriously hurt or killed, only a few techs were treated for minor burns. On that day, those techs outran Usain Bolt on the beach, wearing safety gear. I was brought to Corrida once, and the matador got his leg impaled by the bull while he was trying to get over a fence. The crowd started screaming and booing the bull like it was a foul move. I was like laughing my ass off. The dude f***ing stabbed it. What was it supposed to do? Recite poetry? Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload. Welcome to Reddit Reader. Men are Reddit who proposed and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? My mother told my father no 3 times. On the 3rd time, he got wasted at a local bar and basically started pouring his heart out to anyone who'd listen. Mind you, it's a very small village in the Italian Alps, and my father barely spoke Italian, and no one in the village spoke English, including my mother. Word got back to my mom about the sad American at the bar, so she went to find him and told him she'd marry him. My parents celebrated their 44th anniversary last month. My mom actually said no to my dad's proposal when they were younger. Not because they weren't in love, but because she wasn't sure if it was something she actually wanted to do, rather than something that society expected of her, or whatever. They still stayed together and had kids, hence why you're reading this now, and when my dad was terminally ill a few years ago, my mom plucked up the courage and asked him. Just to get her back after all those years, he said no, before taking her up on the offer a few days later. He died a happy man. Oh, I have a story about this. My friend A had been with his girlfriend B for years, so he decided he wanted to propose. What he didn't know is that B was also thinking about proposing to him. A proposed first, and B freaked out because she had already set her proposal and bought a ring, so she said no. Over the next week, B freaked out more and more and refused to answer A's calls and messages. A then decided to use the money he had saved up to buy a plane ticket to Europe. What was supposed to be a 3-month trip through Western Europe turned out to be a year-long trip around the world. One day, A says that he's coming back, and B decides to go wait for him at the airport and propose to him there. It turns out that while being in Peru, A met a girl, and they fell in love almost immediately and got married in Peru. 5 years later. A and his Peruvian wife are still happily married and recently had a baby, while B hasn't still quite forgiven herself for ruining her relationship with A. She was an art major and I had just joined the army. We had been lovers since high school. I asked. She said no. She wanted to get her master's. We were friends for a while, but we don't talk anymore. She works as a bartender, I think, now. I ended up getting married to my best friend. We've been married for more than a decade and have a 5-year-old son. We met in her home country of Germany while I was traveling. I knew I was in love. We dated long distance for a while, me flying to Europe, her flying to the US. I suggested marriage so we could be together. She said no a few times. I didn't press. But I was patient and not being pushy. I knew she was worth the wait. Then it hit her that's how we could be together. If we got married, we could live in a country together. The difficulties of being born on a different patch of dirt. A few years later, I'm still married to my best friend and living with her in Germany. Not all no's stay no. Life goes on. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, dislike if you disliked it, and subscribe so you do not miss our next upload.